Hi everyone, this is Tammy Carmody with Wisteria Painting. Welcome this Saturday afternoon. I appreciate all of you coming in to watch. What I'm going to be demoing today is how to base coat in enamels. I have a lot of people ask me, how do you get your paint so smooth? Well, there's a couple little tricks that I want to show you today. And as soon as some of you are watching, if you can comment so I know that you're coming in, then we'll get started here. Let me click something out here. Hi, Judy. Oh, good. So we've got people watching. Perfect, perfect, perfect. And what I'm going to do is there's a couple tools that I use when base coating that is going to help you. So the first thing that you need to know when painting on glass is enamel paint goes on very transparent, especially since we're going to be painting holiday things now. We're getting ready for Halloween and fall and Christmas. And when you base coat, it takes about 4 or 5 coats to cover a piece. So through trial and error, I found that using spouncers for base coating to give you the tooth of the paint helps out a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my camera down here, and I'm going to show you my little tricks that I do when painting fall and Halloween and Christmas items to get the opaqueness and the items that I use. So give me a moment, and I'm going to turn it down, and you're going to see the project that we're going to be base coating. Okay, 1 second. Okay, what we're going to be doing is, this is one of the pieces that I am offering tonight. Is going to be a new pattern packet and a class. There is actually a set of 3 of these pieces. It's the teacups with the cookies and the candies. And so those of you who are going to be possibly taking the class, this is a perfect way for you to go back and watch this video before you start your base coating. This way you can kind of see how I do it. So let me get a blank jar out here. And the first thing we're going to do, of course, anytime you paint on glass, you always have to clean your surface, okay? So we're going to clean the surface with rubbing alcohol. Just take a paper towel, a little bit of rubbing alcohol. This cleans any oils, greases, fingerprints, anything like that that you might have on the piece. And then you want to make sure that it's good and dry, because if it's not dry, the graphite's not going to stick to it. So there's a couple ways of putting a pattern on when painting on glass. You can actually take your pattern that I have right here, and we can take this lid off and slide this into the inside of the piece of glass. You want to cut it a little smaller. When I put this on my other jar, I put it on with white graphite. But you can, this is one of the ways that you're able to base coat when doing. So here, let me turn my little tape around, and with this particular one, we will do that. We'll just tape it to the inside. So we're going to tape this to the inside of the jar, okay? That way, if you don't have graphite that works, when I put a pattern on, you have to use a piece of chalk graphite. There's different graphite, different company makes different graphites. And let me straighten this because I don't have it in the middle of the jar here. Okay, where's my seams? Okay, that's much better. Okay, so you can tape it to the middle of your glass, and that's one way of putting on your pattern. The other way of putting on a pattern is to take your jar. I'm going to flip my tape here. Tape your pattern in position where you want it to be onto your piece of glass. Tape it on, and then take a piece of white graphite. Like I said, it has to be see, my surface isn't quite dry, so my tape's not going to stick here, but we'll make this work. Okay, let's push really hard here. Here we go. And then you take a piece of white graphite. You need to make sure it's the chalky type of white graphite. And then you're going to slide this under Let me get another piece of tape. And that way we'll make sure that this holds in place for us today. Okay, sorry about that. This blue tape, the reason they make it so it's removable easy, it doesn't stick really strong. Okay, there we go. So what you're going to do is you're going to, boy, it's still not going to stick here. Well, I'll just hold it in place. You're going to take a piece of white graphite and you're going to slide it underneath, just like you do wood, and you're going to apply your pattern, okay? So I'm just going to put the teacup on here because I want to show you the difference of painting with a brush and then painting with a spouncer, just to give us a little bit of a pattern. So we're going to put that on, okay? And then I have a jar here that I've already applied the pattern. Now, you probably aren't going to be able to see it too well up in the camera, but my pattern is on. My teacup's right here. I've got a tree cookie here, a star cookie here, and a holly here. The reason I like to use white is because you're on glass. If you use the black, what's going to happen is when you turn that jar around, let's see if we can see it on the finished one, you're going to be able to see back lines, where if you have the white lines on from the back side, it's not quite as noticeable. Okay, so that's why I tend to use white whenever possible. Okay, one of the things that I use when base coating anything Halloween, fall, or Christmas is I use these sponge spouncers. These, the best deal to find these are at Walmart. You get 3 different sizes in the bag. You get the 3 large, 4 medium, and 3 small. So these are called sponge spouncers. They're found in the craft section at Walmart. Michael's, Hobby Lobby, they all carry them, but they're like almost $4 for only 2 at Michael's, where you can get 10 for, I think it's $4.97 at Walmart. So I always tell people, go to Walmart to get your spouncers because they only last so long, and then you have to throw them out because they get kind of yucky. So what we're going to do is I tend to use the more small and medium than I do the big. The only time I use the big one is if I'm doing like an entire piece of glass that I'm trying to cover. But when I actually do my patterns, I tend to use the small and the medium a lot more. Okay, so this cup has a red teacup. So if we were to, let me get my red out. I grab magenta and not red. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little difference here. If we were to base coat, you say you have your regular painting brushes that you paint on wood, and you were to base coat, and you go in here and you start painting. Do you see how sheer that paint goes on? Well, it would take forever for that red paint to cover. So anytime there is a big surface that you're able to pounce on the color, and the reason we're going to pounce it is because that's going to give us some tooth to the area that we're trying to base coat, and so we don't have to put 5 or 6 coats on. So what I do is I take my spouncer, I go into my red paint, and I work that paint into that sponge, okay? Then when I start to base coat, I'm always going to start in the middle. You want to start in the middle and work your way out because you want that excess paint here because you have more room to move it around and to work it. If you start over here, what's going to happen is your pattern's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. So you go into the middle and you start pouncing. Now look how much nicer that is covering over that using that brush. So I start in the middle and I start working my way around. Now as I come here and I'm kind of getting the excess off, I'm then going to use the side of the spouncer, and you're just going to do the best that you can to get right along that pattern. Now this does not have to be perfect, because we're going to put a second coat on here, and that with a brush, and that will clean up that surface. So again, start in the middle, and as you get the excess off, you're going to come right, follow that line, and then follow your pattern line. Like I said, the best you can. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because we'll be able to clean up these edges with a brush. And the brushes that I use are Dynasty's glass art brushes. They're very, very, very soft. And the reason that you want to use those for base coating, the softer the brush, the more opaque that paint is going to go on. Okay? And when you're base coating with regular brushes, what happens is as soon as you set that brush down on that piece of glass, it springs back up and the paint won't adhere very nicely to the glass. So I always suggest that if you're going to be doing a lot of holiday stuff, that you get a set of glass art brushes, which you can purchase from me right off my website, which will take you to Etsy. I only have a few sets right now. The company Dynasty's been shut down for a few weeks. They just started back up this week, so I have an order in. So I will be getting them shortly. If you need them and you don't see them on my website, just keep checking. They're just waiting for them to come in. Okay, so I've got this pretty well on there. Now, I'm going to bring this up close, and I don't know if, can you guys see all those little bubbles that are on the piece? We don't really want to work with that if we don't have to, but that's the look that you're going to get with the sponging with a spouncer. So what I do next is I take my spouncer and I pound off, try to pound off as much of the paint as possible. You're going to let your piece sit for, say, a minute or so. Not, it doesn't really have to be that long. And then you're going to come back and with a very light touch. Now, I am barely tapping, okay? And as this paint dries and you're pouncing lightly, it settles down all those bubbles. Okay, and let me see if I can get it back up here so you can see. I know it's probably hard on a camera, but this is really starting to smooth down compared to over here where you have all the bubbles. So you're going to come in and you're just going to keep pouncing. And you're going to pounce until you feel comfortable with what you see. I can't tell you that you pounce for 5 minutes, you pounce for 3 minutes. You just keep pouncing until you like what you see, okay? When you look at it and you look at it from the side and you see that you've gotten most of those bubbles pounced down. Now you are going to have a rough surface. There's definitely going to be some texture here, but it's better than putting 5 coats of red paint on, okay? Or 3 coats of whatever color. But red is a kind of a tricky color to base coat, but you can see the difference in how much more opaque this is. Because we don't want to spend all our time base coating. I don't know about you guys, but me, base coating is the worst job when it comes. If I could find someone just to base coat for me, I could paint the other stuff so fast. So you just keep pouncing it until you like what you see. And I think that's pretty good. Okay, so while you've got that on, another thing that you can do is say you get paint somewhere that you don't like it. This is what's called a cleanup tool, and this is in the cleanup set, and it's a little spongy surface, and this is used for when your paint is wet. So you get it wet, you set it down on your paper towel, and you can come in and actually wipe off anything that you say you went messy with that sponge around, and you can clean up those edges, and you just wipe off where you don't want the paint to be. So this also, like I said, if you feel you're going to get a little too messy with that sponge, you can clean up anything with this little cleanup tool. There's also a tool for dry paint too, but this is the one that's used for the wet. So you just come in and you can clean up. Like I say, if it is going to be fuzzy along the edge, that's okay. Don't worry about that, because once we get the second coat on, we'll be able to clean up any of the surfaces. But you can just clean up any of your surfaces. Now, say your paint dries. You can get out, this is kind of a very, very small stylus, but this is the cleanup tool to get dry paint off of. So you can come in and you can scrape, and that takes all your paint off too. So you can clean up edges with this also, okay, before you move on. Now you can wait until your paint is dry and come back and scrape it off, but this will also clean up edges where your paint has already started to set and dry. So we're going to let that dry here before we put the second coat on. Now I'm going to go to the cookie, okay, the Christmas tree cookie. Now people always, when you put a pattern on, remember you only want to put the main outline of your pieces on only. So all I have is my cup, my holly, my cookie, and my little star cookie over here. We're going to base coat this cookie right here, which is the Christmas tree, in coffee bean plus white. I think that's what my directions say. It's a little bit lighter. The coffee bean's a little too dark. We want the color to be more like a gingerbread cookie color. Now Folk Art has discontinued a lot of paints, so we're going to have to start doing a little bit more mixing to get the colors that we want. You know, when the person that comes up with the colors, I don't know how they make their decisions, but they got rid of a lot of really good colors that I used just recently this last year. So gonna have to do a little mixing. So we want to get kind of a gingerbread color here, brown. Now, when base coating in, this is where your glass art brushes come in to be perfect for base coating because they're very, very soft. So let me show you the different brushes that I use. The set comes with 7 different brushes. These are the 3 that I use all the time. So this is a number 1 round. This is a number 3 round. So you can see it's a little bit bigger. And then this is the 1/8 inch flat brush. Now, when you feel the fibers on these brushes, they're very, very soft. These are made with camel hair, and that's why they're so soft. Where our other brushes are, our regular brushes are a little bit stiffer. You can see here how it doesn't fling up. Well, here these fling and they're just very, very, very soft. So when you're base coating, you have to decide what's comfortable for you. If you feel that you can base this cookie in with a 1/8 inch flat, then use that. If not, you can go down to the 3 or you can go to the 1. I'm going to use the 3 because you can see here how big it is, and I'm able to flatten out that brush as a flat. So I'm going to go to the cookie. Now, I'm going to show you this pattern here, and this is where a lot of people make mistakes. So you can see that the cookie, this is our solid cookie, and then inside of here there's going to be green. Well, a lot of times people will put on this pattern and they'll take their brush and they'll try to base coat just this outer edge of the cookie on. Well, because this paint is so thick and creamy, what happens is they tend to get a lot of ridges. And even when you're painting in acrylics on wood, you should always apply the entire pattern with your base coat, let it dry, and reapply your pattern. That way you don't get ridges, you don't get lumps and bumps. You want your paint to be as smooth as possible. So whenever you're painting, you should always work it as paint on top of paint on top of paint on top of paint. If that means you apply your pattern 4 or 5 times, then that's what you do. You apply the pattern 4 or 5 times, okay? So I've only applied the main outline of this Christmas cookie because I'm going to be base coating this entire thing in. Now, I'm going to be using my number 3 glass art brush. I've mixed this kind of medium brown. So when you go into your paint, I always pull a puddle out and work my paint into that brush. Don't just tip in and go, because as soon as you go down, you have all this paint on the excess that you have to work around. So I always work my paint into my brush, and once again, I always start in the middle. So I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to work my way to the outer edge. Okay? Now, I've got the middle. This is going to take 2 coats of paint because it's not going to cover in one. But you can see how nice this paint is going on. Now that I've started in the middle and I flattened this brush out, I have a nice crisp edge that I'm able to come here and pull my brush and get the lines. Oh, I can't see my pattern too well here. Here we go, down like this. And you just got to keep moving the paint. And it's one thing to remember too in enamels is you need to be painting with a very light touch. If you push hard, you're just pushing the paint across. I'm sorry, ladies, I'm having a hard time seeing my pattern here with the glare of the lights. You're just gliding across here and trying to smooth it out the best you can. I'd rather that you go little, that your first strokes be light and that you have to put more than one coat on than to go thick because you're trying to cover it all in one stroke or in one go around. That doesn't happen in enamels. It's sometimes I have to put 3 and 4 coats on things just because I like my paint to be opaque. I don't like it to be see-through, and most of you who take from me, you probably know that by now. So I've put this on. Now, if I keep working it, right there, I just put a hole there. I don't know if you can see that. Let me bring it up close because it's already starting to set. So I'm just going to let it be because I'll be able to cover that up on the second coat. Okay. Now we're going to go to the little star, and that's just pure white. And I'm going to drop down to my number 1. You can get your brush wet, but it's very important that you blot all the water out onto a paper towel. Your brush cannot hold any water when you're painting on glass. Okay, so it's very important that you blot, blot, blot. So again, I'm pulling my paint out, working it into my brush, and I'm going to come in, start in the middle so we can get some of that excess paint off, and then we can move on to the design. And again, put it on thin. I'd rather you put it on thin than thick because when you put it on thick, you're going to get ridges, and just smooth it out the best that you can. Don't overwork the paint because overworking it, what happens is once it starts to set, we form a hole. Okay? So we'll get this white on here. And we'll get this corner over here. And then we're going to stop. Okay? Because we don't want to form a hole. If you get a hole, don't worry about it. Just let it dry, and then you can cover it up on the second coat. Okay, so that's the first coat there. So you can see that this painting is a little bit blotchy for the first coat, but when we cover it with the second coat, it's going to cover very well. The holly's done with the same way. They do not make Hauser medium green anymore, so we're going to use Thicket plus a little bit of fresh foliage. Those of you who need paint, I am now carrying the full line of paint, so you're more than welcome to order it from me at any time. So if you're out running around and you can't find particular color, just call me, let me know. I'd be more than likely to send it to you. They have taken away a lot of different colors this past year. They've taken away burnt sienna. If there's a color that they've taken away and we can't mix it, I always tell people to go to multi-surface paints because a lot of times you'll be able to find it there. The only difference, it's the sheen. Instead of a gloss, it's a satin finish. But some colors they don't even continue. So burnt sienna is not even available in either one of the multi-surface or the gloss enamels. So I'm just probably going to use a lot of berry wine. They've gotten rid of Butler Magenta, but they've come out with a new pink that will work. It's a little bit brighter, and we just add a little white to it. Or we can use magenta and do that. They got rid of Midnight Blue, but they do carry that in multi-surface. So the ones that I don't have in enamels, I am now carrying in multi-surface also so that we can keep painting with our favorite colors. They also got rid of all the light purples. They only have one purple now, a violet pansy. So we're going to have to mix our purples, but they do make a lavender in multi-surface. So don't be afraid to mix colors if you don't have the right thing. You can always ask me and I'll tell you what I have come up with for it to be close. Okay, so now we've got all those things base coated in. And we're just going to let that dry. Now, it's very important that you make sure that you let your coats dry between coats. Now, when painting on glass, if you have a heat gun or a blow dryer, let me get mine here. If you have a heat gun or a blow dryer, you can speed up this process. The only thing to keep in mind when you're using a heat gun is these heat guns get really, really hot. And if you get in super close like this, you will bubble your paint. I have done that before when I was talking, not paying attention to what I was doing, and I bubbled my paint. So all you're going to do is just lightly go over it, and it just has to be dry to the touch before you can put a second coat on. The other thing I found too is if you use the heat gun and it heats up the jar, and this is warm, the paint tends to grab, so it's best to let it cool down before you put your second coat on, okay? Because the heat, for some reason, grabs those enamels, and your paint doesn't move very smoothly. So you just want to give it a few minutes and let it cool down. Now, everyone's going to be asking me when they see my live sale is tonight at 5:30 Central, 7:30 Pacific. I'm sorry, 5:30 Pacific, 7:30 Central, where I got the jars. Well, the jars came from Hobby Lobby. They are normally $4.49, but of course glass goes on sale every other week, so they're only going to be $2.50 if you go and get them when glass is on sale. There's going to be 3 different prints. Here is the very first one that I'm going to be teaching. I'm going to be teaching them on Friday mornings. August 13th, I think, is the first one. We're going to go 3 consecutive weeks, and we're going to do it at 10 o'clock in the morning, but it's going to be recorded. So if you're not able to attend, you can still purchase the class and watch it at your own time, and we'll be sending you links for that, so you're able to do that. So this is the very first one. The second one is going to be my gingerbread and candy and cookie. So that will be number 2, and this will all be available tonight to purchase. And number 3 is going to be the green teacup with the candy and hollies and greens. So those are going to be the new patterns that I'm going to have. One of the new patterns I'm going to have for tonight. Okay, so this is probably cool enough we can get started. So now I'm going to move to the teacup, and what I'm going to be using is my 1/4 inch flat. Okay, I'm going to get it wet, blot all the water up on my paper towel, work the paint into my brush. And what we're going to do now is, you're going to start in the middle, and you're going to start base coating, and look at how nice that covers. And we're going to be able to cover this cup in 2 coats. We're not going to have to put 3 coats on to get it opaque, because we've sponged it on, this giving us some tooth to our background, so our paint covers wonderfully. Now, again, because you've worked in the middle and you flattened out that brush, you're going to use the side of the brush, and you're going to come right along the edge here, and you're going to be able to clean up, just using the side of the brush, that cup. And look at how nice that cleans up going across there. And you're going to do that all the way around. Now remember, if you still have a little fuzzies from that sponge when you get all done, you can always clean it up with your cleanup tools. Okay? But look and see here how nice this covers here. Again, I start in the middle, work my way out, so that we get all that big excess paint that's along the edge. It's just going to be going on smooth. And then this will cover up really well. Now, if you put it on and you don't like it, or it's not opaque enough, just let it dry, and you can put on a second coat. Okay? So, once you get this all base coated in, and you like what you see, and now you're ready to move on to the painting instructions, you're going to have to reapply your pattern for your detail pattern. So you need to make sure that this paint is dry. If this paint is not dry, your graphite is not going to stick. So that's one thing. It happens a lot on wood too. You know, the paint is kind of a little wet. It has a little coolness to it. So it's really, really, really important that the paint is dry before you put your next detail pattern on. Now, this 1/8 inch brush was a little too big for down in here. So I'm just going to flip over to my number 3. And I'm going to come in here. And I'm going to be able to detail the bottom of this cup. But look at how nice it's covering and how fast it covered over putting probably 4 coats of red if we just painted it on with the brush. So anytime you're painting pumpkins, you're painting snowmen, or the area is big enough that you can use a spouncer, that would be my suggestion, because then you won't be having to do. Now, I've run out of time here, but there's nobody that follows me. So I am going to just put a second coat up here so that you can see real fast how nice it covers on the second coat. And again, I start in the middle and I start working my way out. I'm using the number 3 round brush to put my second coat on, using the side of my brush to get the paint on. Okay. And sorry if you hear grandkids in the background. I have my grandkids here today, and they were supposed to be quiet, but I can tell they're getting louder and louder as we speak, as the time goes on. So here we go, and just smooth it out. And you can see how nice using these gloss art brushes are that your paint goes on. And just smooth it out the best you can. Again, a very light. I'm kind of feathering over the paint. I'm not really pushing hard to smooth it out. And then we'll let that dry. And then once you get it from the light, you can see through because I've got these bright lights here. But once you get all this base coated in and you pull it off to the side without any lights on it, look at it and see what it looks like. Sometimes you might have to put a third coat on. But we put a lot of detail on here, so I'm not really concerned about that because we're going to be dry brushing in here. We're going to be stenciling stars on. You just want, usually 2 coats is fine. Sometimes you might need to do 3. It just depends on the project that you're doing. So those are all my helpful hints for today, and hopefully those of you that are watching today or take my class on these jars, that you will see that how much easier it is to put paint on by using a spouncer and the gloss art brushes. So my time is up here, and everybody go have a great evening and come back and join us. I think we come back on at 5 o'clock Central with Lori Weber. Now, she wasn't able to come on at 1 because she's having some problems with her internet, but hopefully she's going to have it fixed and be able to get back on at 5 o'clock today. So make sure that you come and watch everybody tonight. We have about 7 different artists today showing all their wares and different things, and I hope you guys can all join us. And thank you for watching my demo on base coating on glass. Hopefully this helps, and when you go to do it again, it'll be a little bit easier for you to do. So have a great evening. We'll see you guys again tonight. Remember, I'm on at 7:30. This is Tammy Carmody with Wisteria Painting, and see you all later. Bye-bye.